Alright, question number 6, we're going to be solving all of these in relation to the given function. So we are given the function f of x equals x divided by x squared plus 1. I'll say minus 1 plus 1. Alright, so this is function notation, and we have 8 parts altogether, A through H. And the first one we have f of 0. So this is just notation to denote take the x value and replace it with a 0. So we're going to do that everywhere we have x in the equation. We're going to replace it with 0. And every time we see this notation, that's what they want us to do. Replace whatever's in parentheses where x was with what is now there. So I just put zeros where the x's were, and when we simplify this, we have 0 on the top, 0 plus 1 on the bottom is 1. Overall, we get 0. So they give us an x value of 0. We ended up with the y value of 0. That's what that means. What is the y value when x is 0? Okay, so now we want to do f of 2. So the same thing, it's just a little pattern here. Now we're going to plug in a 2 where x once was, following this pattern. So I'm going to plug in a 2 on the top. On the bottom, instead of x squared, we're going to be plugging in a 2 squared and then plus 1. So on the top we just have 2. 4, 2 squared is 4 plus 1, we get 5. So this time we just have 2 over 5. You can leave it in fraction form. So 2 divided by 5. Alright, now C, we want to plug in a negative 2. F of negative 2. So we have a negative 2 on the top, where that x was. On the bottom, negative 2 squared, and then plus 1. So you just have a negative 2 on the top. A negative 2 squared will give you a positive 4 plus 1, which will be 5. So you get negative 2/5. And you plug in a negative 2. Okay, so now D, we're going to plug in a negative x. We're going to plug in a negative x for D. So f of negative x. Same concept. We're just replacing x with a negative x now from our original equation. So once we do this, there's nothing to evaluate with the negative x on top. A negative squared will become a positive, so we have a positive x squared, and then just plus 1. So the only difference is from our original is a negative on the top, plus 1. So this time we end up with an expression since we plugged in a variable. So negative x divided by, we're going to have x squared, arrow over, and then plus 1. Make sure you arrow out of that squared. If you can hit it here, or I just do shift 6. But once you get it, if you continue to type, let me show you. If you continue to type, your plus 1 is going to be up there as an exponent, and you don't want that. So you got to make sure when you finish, you have to arrow over and then plus 1, so it looks like that. Alright, so we're halfway through. Now we want to do E, which has a negative on the outside. Negative f of x. So f of x, this part is still the same. The only thing different is we added a negative. So that's what you're going to do to your equation. Just add a negative, and you still have everything else is going to be intact. And so all that negative is just going to apply to the outside. So I'm not going to write the parentheses, but you can if you want negative. And then on the top we have x, on the bottom x squared, and make sure you arrow out, and then plus 1. So all the outside negative does is add a negative to the front, which looks exactly the same as negative f of x in this example. Alright, so we got 3 more. X plus 1 this time. So now we're going to do f of x plus 1. So you're going to replace the top with x plus 1. So I know you already have an x there, but you're just replacing it. That's why I put it in parentheses. On the bottom, x plus 1. But this is going to be squared. And then you still have your plus 1 down there from the original. So we're going to distribute and FOIL this all out. So on the top, nothing to do. We just have x plus 1. When you FOIL this out, so what we're doing is x plus 1 and x plus 1. But I'm going to go ahead and do the work. So there's a shortcut. If you square the first term, multiply the 2 middle terms, so that'll be just 1x, and then times 2. So that'd be 2x. You always multiply it times 2, because you'll have 2 terms when you do this. So you have x squared, and then there's 1x, and then this one gives you another x. So that's why we do it times 2. There's 2 of them. And then you multiply, or you square the last term. So square, multiply and double, and then square. So this gives you a plus 1, and then we had another plus 1 out there. So when you simplify, x plus 1 on the top, on the bottom you have x squared plus 2x plus 2. And this will be our expression here. So we have x plus 1 on the top, and then x squared on the bottom, plus 2x plus 2. Alright, so now we're going to plug in f of 4x. So you plug a 4x on top. On the bottom you're going to have a 4x in parentheses squared, and then your plus 1. So on the top, nothing to do with 4x. On the bottom you're going to square. They both get squared. So 4 squared is 16. X squared is x squared, and then plus 1. So we end up with 4x squared divided by, 4x divided by 16x squared plus 1. And why is that? X squared plus 1. Alright, and then one more part. It's going to lead us into something we're going to see a little bit later on, which is a difference quotient. We're going to do f of x plus h. Alright, so f of x plus h, same concept. You're going to plug in x plus h. Everywhere you have an x. X plus h will be squared, and then the plus 1. So we have x plus h. We're going to FOIL this out, so that's going to give us x squared plus 2xh, and then square that, plus h squared, and then plus 1. So what I did is you square the first term, multiply these two together, so that's how I got xh, but you always double it, so 2 times that, and then you square the last term, and then add your plus 1. Alright, so that will give us our last part. So x plus h on the top. On the bottom we have x squared plus 2xh plus h squared plus 1.